Thank you to everyone for being here today for our presentation on the 2024 bond election. We're on Zoom right now in a way to be able to connect with some of our community members who might have a little bit of time at lunch and want to learn more about the bond election. So we are on Zoom. We're also streaming live on Facebook. We do have a Q&A chat feature down at the bottom of your Zoom screen right there. So please, as you have questions, you can feel free to type those in, and we will do our best to get to those at the very end of the presentation. And we'll stay on and answer all the questions that come in. But other than that, I'll let Dr. Robin Bullock, our superintendent, kind of kick things off here.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. As David said, thank you so much for joining us today. We know your time is very valuable, and we appreciate you giving some of it to us. As David said, obviously, we are here to talk about the upcoming bond election for Allen ISD, and we are excited to be able to share with you what our community committee put together and what the Board of Trustees approved. And so you will hear from David Hicks here in just a little bit. He's our Chief Communications Officer, and he's going to kind of talk about processes and timeline. Brett Benningfield is our Assistant Superintendent for Facilities and Operations, and he is going to talk about the projects themselves and go a little bit deeper into that portion of the presentation. And then Brian Carter is going to kind of wrap it up at the end, talking about the tax rate and financing and some other things like that. So as David said, please, as we go through this, type your answers or your questions, in the question and answer section, and we will definitely be able to answer them by the end. So we will go ahead and get started, David. They only give me one slide, and so this is my slide. And where we want to start is kind of reflecting back on bond election of 2020. And we went out for a bond election in 2020, and it was 96% successful, 97% successful. Two of the largest propositions passed, and so we were super excited about that. And you can see here that the promises that we made back in 2020 were the promises that we kept, and we completed our projects on time and on budget. And I'm not going to sit here and read all of these to you. When Brent does his part of the presentation, you will see some of these very same topics mentioned. And so we'll talk about campus renovations in the 2020 bond. You can see there the campuses that received the new renovation. And we're renovating our schools a little bit differently than in the past. And Brent will talk about some of those and show you some comparisons for that. But we really base it off of our SHORE 2030 strategic vision and what a 200 committee group from the community put together to really build out to what they wanted our schools to look like and what we wanted to accomplish over those years. And so it's really tied to the strategic vision, and it's also tied to our graduate profile. And so as you can see here, the campuses that were completed, like I said, the capital projects that were done, and then cross-curricular district projects of safety and security, transportation, and technology. And so I will turn it over to David, I think, and he will talk to you about the process. David, you're muted.
Thank you. It's been a while since I've been on Zoom. Thank you, Dr. Bullock. So as we talk about the completion of the projects from 2020, we'll now look forward of how do we get to here where we are today in looking at an election in 2024. And so as those projects started to become completed and finished out from that 2020 bond, there was a committee of citizens who came together to determine what does the next step look like for our school district. There were two separate committees, one that was formed a year ago in the fall of 23 called the Long Range Facility Plan Committee. And really what they did is looked at the next 10 years of projects and kind of where those needs fell in line. They met during the fall semester and presented a recommendation to the Board of Trustees in December. And then that led into a new group to form in the spring of 2024. They started meeting in February of parents, grandparents, community members. We had teachers and staff on that committee, and also students from the high school who helped serve as representation on that committee as well. That group is called Project Kids. There are 81 members on that committee, and they met in the evenings during that spring semester, several hours at a time. They also met on a Saturday morning and toured our campuses, our district facilities, to gain an up-close look to see what some of those needs were. And they ultimately presented their recommendation to the Board of Trustees in May. The board heard that information. They then continued to hear at additional meetings during the summer more information from district staff. And ultimately, they decided to call for a bond election that would be on the ballot in November of 2024. And so that's where we are today, is to talk about the facts of the recommendation that was presented from that committee and approved by the Board of Trustees. And so here's just a couple of quick photos of that committee at work. You can see how they were grouped into tables. You can see a wide representation of our committee there. And basically what their goal was to see the individual projects that were listed and determine what they recommended to move forward for ultimately the committee's approval or the community's approval through that vote. You can see them on the tours here. You see them working at the tables. Really what they did is they had a list of more than 40 projects that they could consider to put in that recommendation, but they didn't put all 40 on that list. They were very thoughtful in their approach. They wanted to make sure that they presented a list of projects that would be palatable to the community, because we know that the community is going to go out and vote on this. And so ultimately they selected about 23, 24 projects to move forward. So this wasn't just something that they said, we want all of it. They were there very careful in their consideration of what they ultimately move forward on. And I'll say this, you'll see that on the far right side of the screen, that Project Kids has been around for more than 30 years. Project Kids was initially formed in the early 90s. Of course, the committee membership has changed over the years, but what has remained the same is the goal of that committee. And the goal is to study the needs of the district related to capital projects and facility needs, and ultimately present a recommendation that best supports the students and teachers of our school district. So new membership all the time, but still that same underlying goal. And throughout that process, what they ultimately recommended, they came to consensus, which, by the way, finding 81 people, putting them in a room and asking them to come to consensus on anything is a difficult process, but they were committed to that goal. And they ultimately recommended campus renovations, capital projects, transportation upgrades. I'll stress safety and security enhancements and improvements across the district, and also technology upgrades related to network infrastructure and also physical devices for our students and staff. Ultimately, they wanted to create modern, safe facilities that would provide a consistent student experience across the board. And so to learn a little bit more about those specific projects, I'll have Brent Bedingfield jump on and tell you a little bit more.
All right, thank you, David. So as we begin to look at the actual projects, and just to give you kind of a high-level summary of all the projects that the committee decided to include in the bond proposal, we begin looking at the modernized facilities and the full campus renovations. As Dr. Bullock mentioned, back in 2019, a very large community committee was formed to set that strategic vision for the district, a long-term vision, and determine from that point moving forward how that our community wanted kids to be educated in the city of Allen. And so when we come through and look at campuses that need to be updated or renovated, we try to do it in a way that the renovation and the way we any changes we make to the building fit that vision and enable us to put into practice those types of learning facilitation that the community determined were important. If you look at this list, you've got Curtis Middle School, Ford Middle School, Olson, Cheatham, Green, and Norton Elementary, and then the Anderson Early Childhood School. And these were the campuses. The committee, they look at that long-range facility plan and they look at a large 10-year scope, but then they choose the projects and the campuses that they determine are in most need of an update and a renovation at that time. And these are the campuses that they selected. As we go through and look at modernizing the facilities, I want to mention that when we do a full renovation, and we mentioned this full renovation, it's very different here in Allen now than it may have been in decades past. Also, maybe some surrounding districts. What we do, and again, we'll use like the elementaries as an example. 2 days after school is out, that school on the inside is pretty much taken down to bare bones and the studs and completely demoed, and then we begin with a complete and full redesign of that campus. And 68 days later, man, we need all 68, but 68 days later, we open it up essentially as a brand new campus for those students and those families. As we move forward and we start to look at some visuals and some pictures, I'll talk about some of the things that we do that make this renovation pretty unique. I do notice, and I need to mention, there's a footnote at the bottom of the slide there. I know David added that on there. But one of the questions in a lot of the original presentations we were getting was, as we went through the presentations, there's lots of projects and that were included by the committee, and people wanted to know, what is your capacity to handle these and do these and get these completed? And it's to our estimation that we would be able to complete all of the projects that were included by the committee, including the full campus renovations, by the end of 2029. So just as a point of reference and a time frame for getting all these done, that's at the bottom of this slide as well. All right, Dave, do you mind? All right, so this is going to be an example for you. In 2020, Allen ISD began approaching renovations this way. And so we already have a set of schools that have undergone this process. And so the cool thing is we have great data and visuals to show you, not of other districts or other campuses outside of Allen, but our very own examples of Allen of what's taken place and what we can expect moving forward. So imagine here you've got a tripod and a camera set up this corner hallway in Chandler Elementary School. This picture would have been taken before the renovation. And then if you fast forward 68 days later, when we're done with the renovation, this is what that exact same viewpoint would look like in Chandler Elementary, and does look like. So that is taken essentially in the same location. And no, that was not behind the wall, and we just demoed the wall and opened it up. That is a complete redesign of that space. One of the things I mentioned to people as we present, these families and students that and staff that come back into these buildings after the renovations, they often talk about how the school, even though we don't do add-ons, we don't extend the exterior walls of the building any or add on to them or add square footage in that way, but often the staff and students mention that the building feels bigger. We do actually gain square footage though. One of the things we do, all these buildings that we're looking at were designed 30, some of them 40 years ago, and a lot of the mechanical systems, electrical system, plumbing systems that were available back then, we just have better options to choose from now. And that allows us, lots of older buildings, you walk into halls, schools included, things like MDF closets that are just mechanical closets. And they might have large machinery that has to do with the HVAC or the electrical systems, the plumbing systems, the HVAC systems. We're now in a redesign able to pull all those out of the building. And when possible, we convert, and most of these we convert to geothermal systems. And we put those mechanicals underground outside. And when we do that, then we're able to go through and recapture all of that square footage that used to have the mechanical systems inside the building. And now we can redesign and reuse that square footage for other purposes, most notably for purposes for students, collaborative spaces, maker spaces, just enlarging learning areas and adding some diversity to the types of spaces we have within the building. So this is an example of the Chandler Library. After that, and then behind that glass in the back would be a maker space that all the libraries in the older design have. It's just not, it's not formatted the exact same. And this makes much better use of the space. Dave, can you go to the next one? So there are 2 middle schools on the list. You saw Curtis and Ford there. So we have done one middle school so far in Allen ISD. So same scenario here, picture taken on the corner of a hallway in a space at Erickson Middle School. And if you fast forward to post renovation, that's what that area looks like. This is a case of, in that particular area, we were able to remove quite a few, this is upstairs, quite a few mechanical systems. And all of what you see in the center now, those are actually 3 different collaborative learning spaces. As I began working in Allen and going to Erickson quite frequently, I can tell you that those spaces are used all the time. Teachers pull those kids out of those classrooms. and for certain activities that are designed to be done in a more collaborative space, and they utilize those spaces during parts of their lessons. This is a slide also where lots of times I talk with people we're presenting to about other goals of the renovations. It's always to become more efficient if possible, especially with utilities. These buildings and things you may or may not notice in a picture like this, all the lighting is converted to LED lighting for an energy savings. Things like the carpet here, instead of just single panel rolled out carpet that if you get a tear or a stain, you have to pull up the entire hall or roll or cut and try to seam and stitch and patch. These are individual utility squares that you can just pull up that particular square and throw a new square down. The walls, instead of wallpaper that get gouged and marked up, you have tile wainscoting up to about shoulder height, and then painted walls, and then other design elements too, as far as the way the ceilings are done to trap warmer air in certain sections and lead to more efficient cooling. There's just all kinds of things that are done. I mentioned the geothermal HVAC systems. I just want to say that now that we've done several of these since 2020, we can compare data and our utilities from one year to the next. And what we've shown in all of these conversions, converting to those geothermal systems, our utilities are dropped by about 30 to 33%. Is what we're experiencing at those campuses once we switch over to those geothermal systems. So those systems end up paying for themselves in about 4 years of use, not to mention your typical HVAC style for these buildings, your old style with chiller towers and things like that. You're going to get maybe 15 to 17 years of life out of those systems, whereas the geothermal systems, you're looking at more a 20 to 25 year life cycle out of those. All right. Okay, so some other projects that the committee wanted in the bond and decided to put in the bond was an update to the Allen ISD activity complex. This complex is over on the high school campus. It was built in 2000 and has not really been touched in any way since. I talk about, my own house that year 2000. I moved into my own home, and I've been in that home for 24 years. And I think about what it would look like if just my family of four trekking through every day if we hadn't replaced any carpet or finishes or things since then. There's just, everybody knows there's wear and tear on the building, much less when you have thousands of individuals on a daily basis in an area or in a particular building. So this building is certainly in need. The committee asked to go and view this building and tour it. They did. And it is in need of an update, and because it has not been updated anyway since the year 2000. Another thing that the committee began to focus on was it's an activity complex, so they began looking at the actual activity space. If you've never been in that building, the activity space in that building is only about a 40-yard square space. The rest of that entire building, it's locker rooms, there's a weight room in there, we have business offices in that building, we have coach and director offices. So the actual space for activities for the students is that 40-yard square, which just means that it's a great space, but it's a single use space, and that only one student group or activity can take place at a time. And as we listen to the community members, students that were in the committee, and also some representatives from the high school, they talked about the need for more simultaneous programming. And all that means is, being on a block schedule and modified block schedule, you may have several groups that need a space for participation during the day, but with only one space like that, it affects scheduling. So let's say you're a girls soccer player, and you're scheduled third period because that's the only period for your activity that space is available. That's fine. But then if that also happens to be the only period that over at the STEAM Center robotics is offered, and you wanted to take that, or you're trying to dual enroll in Collin College and get some dual credit, and it's the only time of day your credit class is offered for that, it really starts to hamstring and limit the scheduling and opportunities for the students. And so the committee started to talk about some concerns with that limited space. Another thing, there were quite a few fine arts and band parents in that committee that began to talk about the fact that the Allen Eagle Band never uses this complex. And when I talked to the fine arts director, he said, no, Brent, that's correct. He said, I've got a 512 member band. We can't even begin to fit in that small 40-yard space at the activity center, much less take formation, drill, things like that. So the committee began to look at some options for a multi-purpose complex on the same grounds over there nearby at Allen High School, and really not to duplicate what is already existent in the activity complex, but really a building that would be more just of an open space that you could divide at certain times of the day into 3 or 4 parts and have multiple groups that needed the space during the day participate at the same time instead of having to be scheduled at different times, or at one time a large group like the band, your color guard, other groups, JROTC that do drill work and things outside throughout the day would have a space to go and it not be limited to one 40-yard space where only one group was allowed to use at a time. We don't have a rendition of what that exactly would be, but I know the Davis Communications Department came up with this image to kind of show what that size space would look like. The important parts here, there's a few things. You see these large blue curtains at the top. This is an example of where these could drop and you would divide the space into 3 sections, each of those spaces being a 40-yard space. So essentially you would have 3 times the space that we currently have now. So on that far end behind the blue curtain, you could, let's say, have color guards scheduled into a period. In the middle section, you might have JROTC or another student activity going. And then on this near side, on the section that's 40 yards, you could have, let's say, girls softball could be scheduled and they could be taking infield practice on this end if it was a weather inclement day or extreme heat or cold. It's another reason this came up with the committee. Last year we had over 70 days at Allen ISD where now we follow those state guidelines and state rules for student safety. We had over 70 days that we were under some sort of heat advisory last year, which meant depending on the level, sometimes it was just you're not allowed to participate outdoors at all. Others it was limited to an hour. There's some other phases that limit the time and then some circumstances. And so having more space that's covered for students to participate takes away some of those restrictions and allows some of those last minute scheduling things where all of a sudden parents are getting emails that practice of whatever kind is going to be at 5 a.m. the next morning just to get it in before the heat. Same thing in the cold. We have cold weather advisories, certainly more and more that we're facing in the winters. And then throughout the year, we have lightning situations. One thing I did want to point out about this facility, one thing the committee was interested in is the committee wanted a design where it would not have to be air conditioned, so it wouldn't be a burden for utility costs. So all the designs we've looked at would have 7 large garage doors on one side, as you see in this image. And then at the top of the other side, there are large induction fans that then pull air through those doors across the participants that are undergoing their activity, and then pulls the air up to those induction fans and expels the heat out of the building. I toured several of these on 100+ degree days, and they're not cool like climate cool, like you would want to sleep in one for the evening, but they are cool to the point of being completely safe and acceptable for participation. Certainly out of direct sunlight, out of lightning, or out of direct cold, wind, rain, sleet, all of the elements. So that is an important factor here that the committee was adamant about. If it was going to be a large participation space, it not being an air-conditioned space, but being rather one of the ones now that is using induction fans and cross ventilation. Another thing that may go as a part of this facility is, and this is actually much larger, but this would be as if you combine the two classroom presentation style classrooms. We have classes that meet in the current activity facility, but we don't have a classroom out there. And everything from athletic injuries to sometimes you have other classes that have public speaking or presentations, things. So these are presentation style classrooms. This would be one, if we did it this way, this would actually be both of them together, and it would have a wall that you could divide down the middle into 2 separate. classrooms, but those would be a classroom that would be attached to that open activity space, so that those classes that meet out there would have an actual classroom to meet in, or classrooms up in the building that have certain projects or speeches or other things to present. They could utilize these for presentations, much more like a college style, lecture hall style presentation space. All right, David. So some other elements that are throughout the bond are safety and security. A lot of the safety and security money in the bond is tied up in providing additional cameras to campus areas to enhance the security coverage. We go through audits from the TEA and even third-party outside vendors that will come and audit the security of our campuses, camera coverage, and as anything, there's always new areas that we discover as things happen through the years that we need better coverage. And so this bond would provide that, as well as the updating of lots of our cameras. We've got over 3,000 cameras in the district, not all installed at the same time. They're installed when that building is built or renovated. And then those cameras are dated. And as better software comes out, especially security software nowadays, with AI technologies for things like weapons detection or other things, they're great to have, but they only work if you have cameras that are capable of running that software. And so this would allow us to continue to update all of our older cameras to better capabilities. And this money also allows us to reconfigure the main entrances at certain campuses. They're in need of it. All the campuses that have been renovated already have a much more friendly design as far as for security friendly. At the main entry point, the center vestibule and visitor entrances, they're designed in a way that completely limit access to the main parts of the building, provide better security for our front office folks, and also better vision for the people working in the campus to who's coming into the building as well. Other safety equipment, we've got AEDs, fire alarms, fire suppression, fire panels. All those are important life safety systems that we have to keep up to date, and they do have expiration dates. They do expire. It's not something as simple as just replacing the batteries in the AEDs, and those are like your portable defibrillators that every year save student lives across the Collin County in schools. But those things have to be replaced. They're very expensive pieces of equipment, and they do have expiration dates. And things like your fire suppression fire panels, those have dates that they have to be replaced as well before they reach the end of their life cycle. All right, David, move to the next one. Transportation. The biggest thing in transportation is the purchase of school buses. In a bond cycle, you try to replace about 20% of the buses. For us, the lifespan of a bus is about 10 years. In 10 years, we expect a bus in Allen ISD to reach between 150 and 175,000 miles on it. And at that point, we find ourselves that we're, as most districts at that mileage, we're putting more into the maintenance and repair of the buses than it costs just to replace the buses at that point. Other things, the transportation part of the bond, we constantly are having to upgrade our equipment in the shop. It is a huge cost savings for us to be able to work on the buses in-house and not send them out to a third party. But just like your cars that you and I drive, there's more and more technology on our own vehicles, and the shade tree mechanic and being able to work on things in your driveway, it's gotten more and more difficult. Same thing with school buses. So we have to constantly upgrade the maintenance equipment for those mechanics to be able to work on the new systems in the buses. And then also we're looking at, we aim to upgrade the legacy system of hardware and software in the buses. This is the cameras in the buses. This is, when I came to Allen, I noticed right off the bat, there was no GPS tracking and things on our school buses to know where they were located, or be able to provide parents through an app updates, like if a bus is running late, where they could just get a message, or updates to your student has been dropped off at school at 7:42 a.m. Things that all these modern systems in transportation can do, and many of our neighboring districts are utilizing, that we want to implement here in Allen for students and families. This would allow us to move towards that as well. All right, technology updates. In the buildings, everybody's pretty familiar with the Empower One-to-One program, which provided students with devices like Chromebooks and teacher devices for instructional purposes. But a lot of the other technology updates that you see listed here are more about infrastructure. Those devices are only as good as the infrastructure and the speed that we can provide them to be able to utilize the programs that they're working on those computers. So you can see the list out there, all of the bullet points of the technology that will be addressed with AV upgrades, network infrastructure, and updates to our technology systems. And then we started that first slide with all the campuses that are getting full renovations, but all of the campuses in the district are touched in some way by this bond proposal. That was really important to the committee, whether it's updating or repairing certain mechanical, electrical, plumbing systems in places where they're needed, those one-to-one computer devices. We have some cafeterias that haven't been touched in 30 or 40 years, as far as not the cafeteria where the students eat, but the part behind the serving line where food is prepared. The machinery is ventilated, and the plumbing. We have things that need to be addressed there. Playground equipment and repair replacements. This bond would lead to every single playground at all of our elementaries having a shade structure. They currently do not. And this would place a shade structure there so that we could extend the opportunities for recess for those young kids, and much needed recess for those teachers as well, to get the kids outdoors, as well as other upgrades at playgrounds that are needed. We've talked about some of the others on the other side: safety and security, technology. We've got grounds and irrigation repairs that need to take place across the district. And then we've got some hail damage, roofing and waterproofing as well from the storm, not this past May, but the May before, that we're going through and still making roof repairs, and then concrete and foundation repairs. Speaking of foundation issues, this is just to give an idea. When we say foundation, the committee actually asked to go out and look at some of these. So we took them to Ford Middle School. Ford Middle School is unique in that it opened up in 1982. And at the time, for beautification, they were required to plant some beautiful large oak trees around the campus, but many of them that were planted at that time, 10 feet or less from the building. And over 40 plus years, those trees grew to be massive, arching out over the campus, but also the roots going under. And those roots began draining all the moisture out from under the foundation. And especially in 2023, when we had the extreme drought and extreme temps, we saw this accelerate. And if you go to the next one, David, this is an example of what you're seeing in these slides. This is in C and D Hall, where the foundation, because of the lack of moisture from those trees, and again, that's not our assessment. We had to have a structural engineer come out and look at these to see and tell us, what is causing this and what do you recommend. They recommended the strategic removal of certain trees, which has already happened, to allow the soil to try to rebound at some point. But it can only rebound so much, and then the foundation has to be addressed in other ways. This is an example of looking from the hallway in Ford Middle School into a classroom from under the wall, where the foundation has dropped and the wall has stayed in place. And you can see there somebody's Crocs and socks there under the wall into the classroom. And also, that's the same hallway. Lockers are attached to the floor unit. And if the floor is dropping, the lockers begin to pull and drop away from the walls. And then I believe the next slide is some of our safety concerns with this. Door frames begin to come out of square. And then we have to go out and plane off the doors, because teachers have to be able to pull the doors shut and lock and secure them in case of a lockdown or other emergencies. But you can see there, in doing that, because of the foundation damage that Mother Nature has caused, we've got some repair work there that can only be corrected and fixed with addressing the foundation. So those, when you see foundation repairs and things included in the bond, those are the things we're talking about. Some other competition surfaces that are in the bond, both Curtis and Lowry, the track is in need of replacement. At Curtis, it's structural, again, much like what you just saw at Ford. It has to do with the original foundation that's under the track. Those tracks have a concrete foundation. There's been shifting in certain lanes of the track, shifting and breaking away from the others. And then at Lowry, it's just at end of life, and those tracks have to be resprayed and recoated. And you see some coating there that is chipping and pulling away, and that becomes a safety issue as well. Lowry tennis courts are also in the bond. The committee began to ask us, what are y'all planning to do with the Lowry tennis courts? We said, well, not really anything at this time. They asked a question about, well, would you ever consider, if we put something like this in a bond, would you consider repairing it, but then opening it up to the public, maybe even painting pickleball lines on the courts in addition to the tennis lines so that the public could use them? And we said, sure. So that was something that the committee then included in this bond proposal, was refinishing the Lowry tennis courts so that we could reopen them safely, and then actually adding pickleball lines to those so that after school hours, those could be opened up to the public for use. All right, and I believe that brings my part to an end. I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Carter for the finances.
Great, thank you, Brent. Well, as Dr. Bullock began this session talking about the 2020 bond and the projects that were completed and done on time and on budget, and David walked through the proposal process and how this program became a bond called by the board in August, and Brent's gone through the projects. And so then it's the role of our team in financial services to work with our underwriters and our financial advisors to find out, okay, with the given projects within that bond program, what, if any, impact is there to the tax rate and to the taxpayers of Allen ISD. And so with this, we'll see the bond propositions here in a moment, but the total of those bond propositions is just in excess of $447 million. And so as we worked with our financial advisors on that, we are able to complete all of these projects using the existing tax rate, which is currently 39 cents on the interest and sinking part of the Allen ISD tax rate. And so it is a great opportunity for the district to move forward with that without an increase on the existing tax rate. And looking back at the 2020 bond, that message was there as well, that the 2020 bond could be accomplished with using that existing tax rate. And actually in 22-23, we were able to drop that interest and sinking tax rate from 41 cents to its current 39 cents. So again, we are completely confident we can complete all of these projects using this existing tax rate. And then this slide just goes through on our fiscal responsibility piece, just showing you a tax rate history on the graph on the right, going back to 2013 at a 54-cent drop in the Allen ISD tax rate, which currently this year sits at $1.1258, which is the lowest tax rate since 1993. Obviously, the district can't do anything in regards to the value of a home within Allen ISD, but the tax rate again is the lowest since 1993, and we continue to make sure that we can keep these tax rates as low as possible. So going to the propositions. So if you were here in 2020 for that bond election, you saw multiple propositions within that bond election. Those are legislatively mandated. This is not something that Allen ISD has a control over. And so matter of fact, just this last week, we approved the bond language between our bond attorneys and Collin County, the ballot language, and for what that ballot language looks like for each one of those propositions. And so we'll go through each one here. Proposition A, obviously the largest proposition, is dealing with a lot of the projects that Mr. Benningfield just talked about. You can read here that the campus improvements and safety and security, and the campus improvements as well. And so just over $419 million. This Proposition A also does in that forward renovation. That forward renovation includes both the internal campus renovation and the external facilities. And so that is our only middle school that does not have a track and a turf facility. And so Proposition A would include both the forward renovation and a turf and track facility there at Ford Middle School. Proposition B deals with the two track surfaces that Mr. Benningfield showed you. So those two at Lowry and Curtis, the reason they have to be in their own proposition is because those facilities seat more than 1,000 people. And there is a legislative requirement that if you have amendments to a facility that seats more than 1,000 people, they have to be in their own propositions. And so those two surfaces are in Proposition B. That dollar figure of 5.3 million is more than just the spray or the running surface that we see when we walk out onto a track surface. That actually includes a lot of the structural work for the concrete and asphalt that make up that surface itself that is well past its useful life. And that's a process that you need to go through every now and then to reset the structure of that surface. So, and then Proposition C are the technology devices. This, as Mr. Benningfield mentioned, this is a lot of the Empower One-to-One program. So these are devices that are in the hands of our students and our staff. So when you walk into a instructional classroom and you see the teacher's Microsoft Surface or laptop and secondary screens for instructional purposes, those items must be separated into their own proposition. So that is Proposition C here for $23 million and change. And just so as these look, and these will be, from what we understand, the last 3 items on the election ballot. Each one of them is its own vote. If a person chooses to go vote, you will see on the ballot Proposition A in English, Spanish, and then it will say for or against. Then there will be Proposition B in English and Spanish, and for or against, and Proposition C, English and Spanish, for or against. So each one of them are their own ballot language and their own ballot vote. So you certainly could choose to vote for 1, 2, 3, all or none, but they are 3 independent votes. And then with that, we'll close with a couple of slides. Here's the voter registration information. And then obviously the deadline for that, October 7th, our early voting dates. Early voting starts on October 21st. And then election day obviously comes in at November 5th. And then the last slide here, we launched this a couple of weeks ago. The AllenISDbond.com website has all of the information that we've provided to you here today, and more information to come. One of the things that we're really excited about releasing here very quickly is a discussion, as we've presented to a lot of the PTAs, is could we have a section on the website that delineates out by campus what part of that bond is touching each campus. As Mr. Benningfield mentioned, we've got a slide in there that every campus will receive improvements from this bond, everything from Wi-Fi and infrastructure pieces to full campus renovations. And so we're very close to launching that on the website, and I'm sure we'll make some social media references back to that to make sure everybody's aware of it, that you'll be able to click on each individual campus and see what part of that bond is touching that campus. And with that, we've come to the conclusion of the presentation, and I believe Mr. Hicks is going to lead us through any Q&A that's out there between this presentation and out there on Facebook Live.
Well, and before you do that, David, will you go back to the slide where the propositions are listed? I just want to, and Brian said it, I just want to kind of hone in back to this particular slide, because I think the slide's really important. The committee, like Brian said, the committee didn't put these propositions or list out these propositions this way. These are legislatively mandated, as he said. And so this is the reason the projects or the propositions were broken out in the way that they were. But this is really a complete bond package. It's one bond package. The committee was really talked a lot about that, presenting a bond package to the Board of Trustees for consideration. And so they presented the one bond package to the board. And like Brian said, just legislatively based on the requirements and by law, we have to break them out this way. And so they didn't say one's more important than the other, or this group needs to be A and C and all that. So I just wanted to kind of come back to that, because I think when you're not in it and know the rules around or the laws around what's required, then I think it can be a little confusing. So David, you're up.
Okay, so one of the questions we have here, it says, how are contractors and vendors selected to perform the work approved by the committee? And so this would be if the bond were to be successful, how would we go ahead and choose those contractors and vendors? Brian Carter, do you want to jump in on that one?
Sure. So obviously the finance department, facilities departments, and the purchasing department coordinate with that to do RFP and RFQ processes to solicit out for vendors who want to take on projects within this bond election. That's not unique to Allen ISD. That would be any district out there that's looking at large capital improvements. You're going to go through a public RFP or request for proposal to talk about the scope of upcoming projects and solicit responses from vendors who are interested in working on those projects. Those are out there for a minimum of a 2-week. It's normally on the projects that size, 3 and 4 weeks that we solicit for vendors. Those vendors submit responses, and then those go through a formal review process here and are scored based upon a multitude of factors to find what is in the best interest of Allen ISD, and then those contractors will be awarded based upon their RFP responses.
Okay. Thank you to the individual who submitted that question. We also had another question asking if slides would be available. The slides we're showing here today, if they could be available after the meeting. The answer is yes. I can, if you submitted your email in the during the registration process, I can certainly make that available. And also follow-up said, do you also offer in-person bond meetings? And the answer to that is yes. We presented a couple times in person yesterday. Maybe we did on Tuesday night as well. We do have several other in-person meetings scheduled. And so what I would say is yes, if you have a group, HOA, church group, group of neighbors who want to get together, let us know. We'd be happy to share this information with anybody who's willing to hear about it. There's a question here that says, where is the indoor activity facility going to be located? And also, will it be accessible to all middle schools and high schools for bad weather days, or just one or the other? Brent, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, so first off, the location just to the east of the current activity center, we have 2 large fields right there that would be a great place for this multi-purpose complex for a couple of reasons. I mean, talking about its proximity to the high school, but also the proximity there to the stadium. You know, right now, like for things like graduation, the one we just had this last May, we had about an hour weather delay because of rain and lightning. We stage all those students over in the high school, and that's a long walk in bad weather over. So we've talked about how that grass area right there just adjacent to the east of the current activity center would be a great place for it. Also, band competitions. We host in the stadium lots of UIL competitions. And so it would also be a great staging area for those bands to be located right there. So right now, it would be just to the east, as far as just the east of the current activity center. Accessible to middle schools or just high schools. So our approach here would be just like our approach with all of our facilities. You know, it's kind of like with Ford right now. They don't have a track over there, and so if they need to have track practice, we put them on a bus and we take them to where we do have a track that they can utilize. Or same thing with Lowry in a tennis court. If we those tennis courts have been out of commission, and we'll put them on a bus and take them to where we do have playable courts. And so this facility to me would be no different in that it would be an Allen ISD facility. And if we have any of our middle schools or campuses that are in need for whatever reason, whether it be weather related or otherwise, that's part of what we do is we get kids to the area where they can participate and complete their activities and affect them as least as possible in a negative way.
Thank you, Brent. Brian Carter, we had a question on Facebook. The question says, why have we not budgeted for these repairs as part of our normal school district budget? And then the question equates it to, as homeowners, we have to make these kinds of budgeting adjustments. Do you want to jump in on that?
Sure. And we do minor repairs throughout the maintenance and operation budget. When it comes to large scale, multi-million-dollar renovations to a building, those funds are not built within a maintenance and operations budget. I would love to do school finance 101 right now because I have the picture when we presented to Silver Eagles this morning about the 2 different buckets within a tax rate. But the maintenance and operations side of the house or that budget is for those day-to-day operations and small repairs. Multi-million-dollar types of renovations are things that school districts are going to need to go to a larger scale bond program in order to achieve those. There simply isn't dollars available in that maintenance and operations. So for context, about 80% of a school district's maintenance and operations budget is people. So you have the other 20% to handle some contracted services and utilities and supplies and materials and that type of thing. So that particular budget is not built for these large scale capital projects.
Brian, and I think it's always interesting when you add about when you're doing like a renovation to your home, when you mention that in the presentations.
Sure. And so thinking back to if I'm looking out here, if I see a home here that decides that they want to put a pool in their backyard, and then that pool may be an $80,000 type deal, a large capital project, you want to add a second living room onto a home or something like that. Those are normally things that people may choose to do some type of a home equity line of credit or some type of other second mortgage on their home in order to do that. But if we're needing to replace a hot water heater or something of that nature, then those would be things we would handle within our normal daily operations checkbook within our personal home. So yeah, great point. Thank you.
Yeah, kind of a difference there between what you would call repairs, things that just kind of happen that you need to take care of at that moment, versus larger scale capital projects.
Yeah, yeah.
There's another question here that I see, and I've asked for clarification on it, but I haven't received that yet, but I'll just read it as it's stated. It says, "Is there a funding allocation breakout on Prop A?" Brian, does that? So
yeah, so there certainly was as the committee went through this to build the bond package. So when the Project Kids Committee brought this to the board, I believe, if memory serves right, there was close to 40 some odd projects that the committee was reviewing, and they came to the table or to the board with about 20, I'm guessing low 20s, 23, 25 projects. And so those all, yes, do have individual dollar amounts attached to them. It's just by the time it comes to a proposition for a ballot, then it all rolls up into one individual number. But yes, there is the transparency behind that 419 million as far as what's allocated for each project in Prop A.
And when voters go to the polls, they'll have the opportunity to vote on separately Prop A, Prop B, and Prop C. But if Prop A were to pass, then all of the projects within that would move forward.
Yes.
Same thing if it were to fail. All of the campus renovations, all the safety and security enhancements, all the transportation upgrades, all the network infrastructure, if that were to fail, all of it would not come to fruition.
Correct. Yes, sir.
Okay, let's see. Okay, so got it. So what is the breakout on Prop A? That kind of goes into it's going to be the campus renovations, it's going to be the transportation upgrades, it's going to be the safety and security enhancements, it's going to be all the playground shade structures, everything Brent mentioned on mechanical, electrical, plumbing, cafeteria equipment and repairs. Am I leaving
buses, activity center?
Buses, activity center, yes, all of that. Really, everything that we've presented. I think here's the easiest way to break this down. Everything that was presented in this presentation today, you can imagine most of that going in Prop A. The only things that are not in Prop A are going to be the two tracks at Curtis Middle School and Lowry Freshman Center, and those are located in Prop B. And then the actual physical computer devices, the technology devices through that Empower One-to-One program that our students and staff would receive, those are in Prop C. Everything else is going to be located in Proposition A.
Mm-hmm.
And so another question just popped up: what props will impact Marion Elementary? So from that standpoint, I would say that it's going to be Prop A is going to certainly impact that as well. Marion also feeds into Curtis Middle School, and so the track surface at Curtis Middle School would be impacted there. So that's Prop B. Mm-hmm. And then all of your technology devices through Empower One-to-One are in Prop C. So really, when you're talking about this specific question about an impact of Marion Elementary, you're talking about Props A, B, and C. Brian, do you see this question here regarding Prop A amounts and the indoor activity center?
I mean, the question says how much of the Prop A amount is for the indoor activity center?
Oh, okay. I would have to look back at the project schedule to get the exact number, because being a finance guy, I want to quote the exact number.
Brent, do you have that handy, or Brian?
Yeah, I don't have that.
Neely?
Right.
I'm looking right now. I believe.
And
like
I don't,
Brian,
while
wanna
you're
get it
looking for
incorrect.
that,
It is,
David, do you see that while you're?
Brian, do you have it?
I do.
Okay, go ahead.
The multi-purpose complex is 39,849,171.
All right.
Thank you.
Mhm.
David, do you see that question about security? I don't know that I understand it. Not a yes or no to a part.
Yeah, I think it might be the same question related to how much is related to safety and security enhancements, a specific dollar figure there.
Oh, okay.
Oh, that one's gonna be, that comes out of both. That comes out of Prop A, Prop C, and it's that's multi. We'd have to add up a couple of different things, I think, for that one. Is that what that
Okay.
one's asking?
I believe so, but I've got that individual's name here too, so we can
Perfect.
also get that information to him.
I think there to the question on how much of the Prop A amount is for the indoor activity center, also you're looking at about 8% of Proposition A. So about 92% of that proposition is for the other items listed here as well.
All right, Brett, there's another question here related to, it says, what are the odds the multi-purpose facility will be used for football practice? You want to take that one on?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm off mute. Okay. Yeah, I'm sure as any of those activities that are outdoor, yeah, of course it would be. For, like I said, for football, for band, for JROTC, for baseball, for softball, for soccer, boys and girls. We've got other classes, PE, that in places we went and looked at similar facilities that they allow them to, on days it's too hot to go outside and things come in. I mean, all those, and like I said, it would be the only facility we have that our band could even fit in to practice. So yeah, that's kind of like the question about the middle schools earlier. With being, would they potentially have any use of it? It's an AISD facility that's there so that we can use it for any group that needs it, any group that would benefit from it at all.
And Brent, you mentioned this earlier, but you're talking about the space that we have right now, which is 40 yards. But with the construction of that new facility, now you have the ability through that 120 yards with the netting structures to drop in between. Now you have 4 40-yard spaces to break up amongst the student groups who need them, correct?
That's correct. And that's what allows you to have that that simultaneous programming throughout the day. Because again, we're not even just talking like before and after school when some of these activities are going. We're talking about during the day when those almost all those activities have a class period assigned to them. And so it is part of their curriculum, part of their school day. I mean, I'm sure a ton of the people on the call right now have had kids go through and they know they have whatever activity, third period, fourth period, whatever it is. So that's the deal. It would allow those groups that need an open space like that to not have to wait on a period just for them, but to be able to at the same time simultaneously be scheduled. And then that opens up all the possibilities with the rest of those student schedules for travel to STEAM Center, Collin College, or other course selections.
And Brent, one thing that I think was pretty impactful during those committee meetings is, like I said earlier, we had students who were in that group, and there was one student in particular that day. It just happened to be that there was a rainstorm that day, and so as they were talking through, he mentioned I believe he was in the track and field program.
He was.
And at the same time, you had all of a sudden the soccer groups who were trying to use that indoor facility, but then track and field, they had to move their practice inside. He basically said, we were scrunched up in the corner trying to make do with what we could, but he's like, we really weren't able to get our practice in because that space was so constrained.
So yeah, that's actually the day that this whole thing came about. Was when, just in general conversation, I think his adult table mates, when he sat down, they'd already gotten to know him a little bit. So, well, how was track practice today?
Mhm.
And he's like, well, actually, we didn't really get to have it. And it was a day, it was just some drizzle, but it was more the lightning. And he said, when that happens, everybody has to move into the 40-yard space. And it was spring. So that was baseball, softball, track, boys, girls of both, all that. And he said, you end up with about a 10-yard space to try to do your activity. And so that his group was the one that started to pursue, well, what could we look at to offer a larger space for all these activities to happen at the same time?
Perfect. Okay. Well, that's everything that I'm seeing right now, and which is actually perfect because we build this from 11:30 to 12:30.
Oh, wait, David, something else just came in. It's in the chat.
Oh, it's in the chat.
Yes, there's a question about if we had mentioned the cooling mechanism. I'm assuming that's at the activity center. And Brent did mention that, talking about how the garage doors on the left-hand side of that facility. And again, this is a sample image here, but you can see garage doors located on the ground level here, and then induction fans up here located on the other side of the building, which allows that air to move across the field there and then escape up on the up at the roof area and bring that hot air out of the building. But
Well, and
not,
I think there's some misinformation online that's saying that we're going to air condition the space. I think that's why we keep getting that question come up.
and
No,
Brent,
no, absolutely not. And that was a priority of the committee when they started talking about a space like this. They wanted to research options that would not need to be include HVAC or air conditioning. And there's lots of these in the area now that have gone up in the last 10, 15 years where they're using this type of system with the large opening doors, induction fans opposite above on the other side to pull cross ventilation and then expel heat at the top. So that's the design that we would put into action.
all right, thank you, Brent. All right, Dr. Bullock, anything before we close off?
I don't think so. I just appreciate everybody who, like I said at the beginning, gave up your time to learn about the bond. And just like David said, we had a question in the chat. If you have a group that you want us to come and present to, we will present to large groups, small groups. It doesn't matter. We presented to one person before in our previous bond election. And so just let us know, reach out. You've got David's contact information, any of our contact information, and we will be more than happy to come out and do it in person or a Zoom. We prefer in person. It's just a little difficult for some people to get there sometimes. So we will do either.
And I think, David, we've got some of this information coming up on the 24th. Is that right? On our community engagement night, we'll talk a little bit about some bonds and the financial piece of it too. So
We do. We have community engagement night at the STEAM Center on the evening of Tuesday, the 24th. And so, yeah, we're looking forward to that. We will have information on a bunch of different subjects, but also the bond as well. So if you haven't yet taken a look at community engagement night, we would love to have you out on Tuesday, the 24th. I believe it's at 5:30, and there's free pizza. I'm going to pitch that. There's free pizza. So come for the pizza, stay for a bond info session. How about that?
And all sorts of different sections. The sessions are neat, very, very informative.
All right. We're going to go ahead and close off here, but thanks everybody for attending.
Thank you.